How's it going, everybody? So I want to talk really quick on something that I was in a conversation about dealing with subjective justice and satisfying subjective justice through the market, and whether or not people could ever really, be satisfied with that, and if people would eventually want to have a government to have some sort of justice. And for me, this is a subject that's close to my heart as someone who really focused on criminal law issues when I studied law. As someone who's actually practiced in that field, who's done stuff especially focused on psychology, juvenile justice, and so on and so forth. Pretty familiar with the topics on at least the U.S. level, and thinking about things nationally, and thinking about legal theories as well as philosophies behind those legal theories. And the thing that just always gets me when people are like, "Oh, well, isn't it just going to ultimately be might makes right, or everybody's going to be upset or unhappy with how the justice is handled?" And it blows my mind that people never think about what is first, right? I mean, whenever people are trying to speculate about how people will feel about market solutions, they never seem to really think about what is. And here's a good example. Let's just say you, and I'm talking you generally audience, right? You had a close person to you, that is maybe a family member or a loved one or close friend, right? They happen to be murdered. And your sense of justice is that whoever murdered this person needs to suffer and die. Right? That's, your sense of justice. It's a purely retributive form of justice. Hey, you did this, eye for an eye, this person must die. Well, you're under this certain state where this act was committed, and that state does not allow the death penalty. So, you might be like, "Oh, they don't allow the death penalty," right? But nobody sits there and complains and says, "Oh, well, there's some states that don't allow the death penalty and some that, do, so, oh my gosh, how's government ever going to work, or how are people ever going to be satisfied, or that's just going to be chaos because, these people want this person, to suffer and die, but they're not going to be allowed to under the state system because they don't allow the death penalty," right? I mean, nobody ever sits there and says, "Oh, well, there's various types of jurisdictions throughout the United States that have different types of sanctions and levels of sanctions." One jurisdiction might say this action gets 1 year maximum, a misdemeanor, up to a year. One might say, well, that's prison worthy, so you could have more than a year. Some might say, oh, that's only just a fine for your actions. Some might say, you're going to jail for those actions. Nobody ever sits there and looks at all the different jurisdictions in the different states and even localities that might have their own, municipal rules. Nobody sits there and say, oh my gosh, there's such a diversity of all these different types of rules. People are just never going to be satisfied with the justice, and there's just going to be violence and backlash. Again, it's ridiculous, because in reality, that's just what happens. People end up saying, there's only so much that you can do in order to rectify the situation. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are retributive, and they really want someone to suffer physically for harms that were done. There's some people who are just like, well, this really stunk, and I'll be happy if you give me $5 million, right? You think about that most often when someone, is in a personal injury situation, or maybe a battery of some sort, or an aggravated battery that'd be more, serious. It's just really, when you come down to every single person's idea of justice is completely subjective. Every person you talk to, you will have a different idea for a host of really infinite different types of harms where they think, okay, this is the justiciable remedy. And that's how come there have been, past judges and stuff like that, people who are supposed to kind of be a form of mediator when tensions are high, when people's heads are running hot. And I think that is something that is a market demand. People are going to want people who are mediators and who work to either provide a form of a justice system, or a system for justice, and that can often come through mediation, arbitration, insurance agencies, and so forth. And of course, I think the real big thing is the accuracy can be greatly increased, especially with technology, and especially if you compare that to the rules of evidence, which are, that's a whole, several courses of study. The rules are not some sort of magic morality as far as the different courts across the United States, and they all have potentially different types of rules depending where you go. Of course, there are rules that might apply in a state, or maybe it's just for a certain special type of court, like bankruptcy court or vaccine court or something like that, or even juvenile justice court. But everywhere you go, the commonality really changes quite a bit as to what justice it is, and nobody knows what the remedies are. You're not going to walk up to any Joe Schmo in the street and be like, hey, how much is the maximum penalty in terms of jail and or prison time and fines and forfeiture for this, name this crime? Nobody's going to know unless they actually are a criminal defense attorney or, district attorney who practices very regularly. And even then, they may not know exactly offhand. They might have an idea, oh, maybe it's a felony or that's a misdemeanor, but they may not know the degree offhand. So this idea that there's this big backlash of people who, if there's market mechanisms to justice, it's just going to lead to mob rule violence, is just absolutely unfounded when you consider the diversity that already exists. And I think that most likely what you'd actually have happen under a system that is more market-oriented, is more open, more accurate, you're going to find that people have remedies that are a lot more individually tailored in a way that I think makes the harms satisfied a lot better. And I think people are going to prevent against those types of risks individually much better in terms of potential insurances against other people's harms and so on and so forth. So I just really find a lot of the critiques that people make about using market-based justice solutions as being a dangerous road toward having people be just angry at the outcomes, and that leads to them saying, okay, well, let's get a bigger group to violently enact on this group, or that's just this. It just realistically doesn't end up happening, or at least for long, before lots of people get caught up in that violence, and it ends up hurting a lot of people, making them say, whoa, okay, this is really not bringing about more peace. Right? When people use trade and they use mechanisms for working with each other, for problem solving, that tends to make people more happy. It just doesn't last that long. And I think people who act that way are going to be quickly ostracized in terms of their actions. It's just one of those things. Again, and is that a perfect system? No. Is it any more perfect than what is justiciable just because a court does it and our judge, does it? Or in one jurisdiction it's a jury of 6 people, or another jurisdiction it's a jury of 12 people. How did having 6 people versus 12 people, and they had a certain number of preemptory strikes that were used, and these people had cause strikes and all this other stuff, how did that suddenly make justice magically, happen? It doesn't. It's all psychology. And when people start adopting a psychology where they're looking to be problem solvers in terms of working with other people through market-based means, joint associations or groups that favor peaceable solutions to different types of harms, it's just going to lead to more peace. And I think people want that. It's not something that people wake up and say, I really want to be inconvenienced today. I want to be poor today. I want to be battered today and really hurt. And I'm not talking about someone in a boxing ring. I'm saying against their consent, right? People don't want that. There's a demand for wanting peace. There's a demand for wanting resolution. There's a demand for wanting security of one's person and property. And in the event of problems that may arise, just like any other problem that could arise, natural or otherwise, have a solution or ability to get a solution that is effective. So again, it's market demand. It can be satisfied, and I think possibly even more satisfied than what currently is. And the way to get there, as I've mentioned in my other videos, I think is not necessarily, okay, day one, get rid of that whole system, the government legal system, but demonopolize and start permitting more and more competition to dispute resolution, and allowing people to find ways to work voluntarily toward making themselves safer or insured against different types of harms. I think that really is the best way to go to see, okay, where is this going to go? Let the market start doing their thing. All right, talk to y'all later.